Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a marketing and branding guru, an author from the Midwest of US, David Brier. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, Ashley.
David is a slayer of the mundane. He's the chief gravity defier of DVD International. He's an author, as I said, and all of you know, I'm always very partial to authors. He's an author of a book titled Brand Intervention. He's also the recipient of the Presidential Ambassador for Global Entrepreneurship, and he's been recognized, felicitated, and awarded several times. So, David, let's start about our discussion with my asking you, tell me about your own journey in brief.
Essentially, I'm a native New Yorker, and so I grew up really in that melting pot of culture, and so I always enjoyed anything having to do with art, creativity, and everything, whether it was the smell of food and as you walk through the streets, or artwork, or a mural, or a performance, or whatever. And so that was always something that always caught my attention. And I was going to be an illustrator, but in my last semester of college, I decided very consciously to become a designer, because being an illustrator, to me, is like, all right, I'm handing off one piece. And it was like, well, do I just want to be kind of like, just know that I've done my job and cross my fingers that the rest is done well? And I didn't like that. And so I wanted to take more ownership of what the full outcome was. So, really appreciate the importance of words. Correct. And meaning and language and color and layout and imagery and all of that. And that ultimately evolved into branding, which is what I do.
Fascinating. So let's talk branding. Let me start by asking you a very basic question. What goes into building a successful brand?
Well, the interesting thing, I'm going to start with what the common mistake, which is essentially, companies they'll look at their mission statement, that they'll do what I call navel gazing. They're looking at their own navel, and they're looking too inwardly, only at their own thing, and they've not looked at the place where their brand is going to live. That place where there's lots of noise, where there's lots of messages, where there's lots of other solutions for what any company is providing. So one has to really look outwardly and really take an inventory of what's the amount of, I call it the noise. Take inventory of the noise, and then you can go, okay, because unless you know that, you don't know if you're adding to the noise, if you're simply being redundant and echoing what others have heard. Because if our goal is to be heard, well, then we have to, in some way, either to some great extent or minor extent, we have to disrupt that pattern of what they've heard, what they've seen, because otherwise we just blend in. So we're in the business, and for those that have read or not read my book, I cover in my book forward definition of branding. Despite the 20,000+ books you'll find on Amazon, you'll literally find over 20,000 books on that, on branding. But I brought it down to the art of differentiation.
Amazing. Well said.
We're all in the business of differentiating, disrupting that sort of cadence that life provides to us.
Amazing, amazing. And my next question to you is, that, and I've written about this also, the brands are living beings. They're like children. They need to be nurtured throughout their life. Some brands, like some of the ones that are there with Procter & Gamble, last 100 years, and some disappear after a very short time. What makes a brand stay relevant for a long period of time?
I love this question. This is a great question. And I'll use Blockbuster and Netflix as an example.
Yeah.
Blockbuster reached the peak of having 2,800 stores worldwide, and now has one remaining store in the state of Oregon in America. Why? And why did Netflix, which started out as a DVD by mail, how did they evolve into being what they are? And why are they worldwide? And so it ultimately comes down to this. no brand can be married to, they're married to the wrong thing. They cannot be married to their solution. They must be married to the problem that they're solving for their audience and the values that go along with that. So for example, Blockbuster was married to what? Well, we're going to have stores, and even if they evolved from VHS to DVDs, they still made us go to the stores. They never changed that. They're going to have their stores, and you bought your popcorn and your licorice and your stuff as you checked out. And the thing that not everyone knows, the majority of their profits were made from the late fees, which meant you and I were penalized for actually having a life.
Correct. Correct.
That's a very bad business model.
Very well said. Absolutely.
And then, but Netflix, on the other hand, Netflix was like, well, okay, wait a second, we're doing this DVD by mail. And then we go, okay, wait a second. Then it becomes, then they realized, oh, there's actually our distribution's changing. So they shifted to digital distribution, then they shifted to digital streaming, but they didn't stop there. They then contributed to the quality of entertainment by producing original programming, more programming than any other media company, including Disney, in the world. And so it's like, are you providing? So what they were providing was something timeless and set, which was entertainment on our terms. And they moved along with the shift. It never changed what they offered. It just made it, they were married to the right thing, whereas Blockbuster was married to the wrong thing. Our solution, boom, we're going to have a store.
Great response. Thank you. And, there are most brands, maybe barring a few, have competition. I'd love to get your perspective on how can a brand differentiate itself from competition in a crowded market?
Very simply, it goes back to what I touched upon, where you really need to take inventory of the noise out there. And in addition to that, here's the trick. It's not just going, okay, what's everybody doing? Let's look at what they're doing and let's do something different. That's too simplified. That's too diluted. What you need to really do is you need to find the commonalities. We live in a world where there's a very small amount of originality. There's a lot of copying or modeling after. Oh, they do that, so we'll do that. They do that, so we'll do that. We'll do our version. So there's lots of flavors of essentially the same thing. So you have to look and go, so what's all the common stuff? Because if we understand that branding is the art of differentiation, well, the antithesis of that, the enemy of that differentiation, would be cliches, overused promises and language, and sounding like everyone else. Then we just blend in. We just kind of like, that's how we fail. And it's, to me, it's one of the most exciting parts, is to find, because I've been doing this for 43 years, and it's tough. It's always there. There's always a differentiator there. And sometimes it's hiding in plain sight. And sometimes you have to really, really, really dig. But all I can tell you is that if you really know and you really persist, it is there to be found. But our job is a job of disruption. So you have to look and go, okay, what's everyone else saying? And let's start listing them out. What are the common overlap? Well, because no one is going to make any progress in the world by saying we're the best. They're not going to do, but we're the cheapest. We're family owned. We're made in the USA, or made here, or made there. Though none of that. That's just dead on arrival. So that redundancy. If you can literally look and go, can one of our competitors also just say that? Can we essentially kind of swap out their brand name with ours? And pretty much the messaging is vanilla, not very distinctive. Then you're on the wrong path. You need to find your differentiator.
Fascinating. And what, in your view, is the role of storytelling in creating a compelling, narrative for one's brand?
To me, storytelling is like oxygen. We inhale it, we breathe it, we love it. It takes us on a journey. It humanizes. The greatest brands in the world are humanized. I mean, it's like, why is it that Apple is Apple, whereas You take a company like Samsung, where the technologies are oftentimes, it's like one might be better than the other. They're pretty close, but yet Apple always had the more human side, especially when Steve Jobs was alive. But even since, they've still really humanized it. And Richard Branson and Virgin, Elon Musk and
Yes,
Tesla, Phil Knight and Nike, Gary Vaynerchuk and VaynerMedia. That humanized quality, that storytelling ability is what makes the difference. And if you need any more proof, what is TED Talks based on? Stories, stories, ideas. They take us on a journey in 18 minutes.
Well said. And based on all the work that you've done with so many brands, what are some of the common mistakes a lot of companies or businesses make when it comes to branding?
They will look at their own. They stay too insular. They like I'm the guy in a conference room that will normally say, when I'm hearing very dull ideas being thrown around and stuff like that. First of all, I don't advocate committees. That's one thing, because committees have a fundamental flaw. Committees are based on, okay, we're going to have a room filled with 8 or 10 or so people, and they're all treated equal. From the person that's been there for 2 weeks, to the person that's been there for 40 years, to the person that is an accounting who knows nothing other than counting numbers, to someone who actually is. So you have, they're not equal. That's a falsehood. And yet they must come to some consensus. And that's a completely flawed, they're going to debate and suck the life out of it. And so don't be so in love with your own mission statement and the inside lens, and lose touch with the outside lens.
Well said. Great response. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question that I wanted to ask you, David, is that, I remember when I was growing up and talking 4 decades ago, branding meant big billboards, cinema halls, full page advertisements. Now we're in the world of the digital economy. Everything is on our little smartphones.
Yeah.
How, in your opinion, are brands going to connect with consumers in this incredibly fast-moving social media and the digital world?
Well, nothing can contain the brilliance of a really incredible idea. Whether the canvas of that idea is this device here, or whether it's a billboard in Times Square, the brilliance of an idea that is willing to challenge the norms, willing to establish a hero, establish a villain, and really, to me, it's kind of like this sequence. Like occasionally we'll talk about, our job is the job of opening eyes, opening minds, opening hearts. And then with all of that done, yes, now someone will then happily open their wallet and engage in a transaction with you. But too often there's this obsession with the finish line. How do we get more customers, more transactions, more sales? And they try and skip and shortcut these other parts. If you're not opening eyes, how is an individual supposed to come to a new conclusion with old information?
Well said. Well said. My next question is on some of the digital marketing challenges. I've been speaking to many brand managers, and I think the whole role of brand managers has changed completely with this new world. What are some of the digital marketing challenges brands are facing?
I think there's two layers to that answer. One is there are brand principles that will work all the time, a number of which we've touched upon.
Yeah.
Oftentimes that's confused with the new channels or the new forms of media. So there might be things with AI, or there might be things with this, or there might be things with that can provide new opportunities. But if we confuse those and we say, oh, that changes everything. No, it doesn't change everything. It changes the medium that we may choose. It may change the speed. We may take a message that may previously have been a few minutes long and now it's 30 seconds long. It changes certain dynamics of the medium and the distribution of that medium, but it does not change the fundamentals.
Well said. So 2 more questions, and I want to move to your book.
Yes.
How does one measure the success of a branding campaign or strategy?
2 things. One is that branding is the thing it is the long play. It doesn't mean that it's slow. It just means that it accrues over time. And so to me, like, I remember a very deliberate, because I have a way that I look when I make investments into companies, like personally investing, like, okay, I'm going to invest into that particular company, that stock of that company. I have certain criteria, and I've always battled with my financial advisors because they're looking only at historical performance and numbers and things. And I said, I'm looking at cultural penetration. And I remember when I started hearing, yeah, I'm binge watching. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Hey, what have you been doing? Well, I've been binge watching this show, blah, blah, blah. And I started hearing this binge watching. And I'm like, that came from one company. That came from one company. And it wasn't, I don't even know that they called it binge watching. I think culture called it binge watching. But what ended up happening was, because Netflix didn't approach programming the same way and go, okay, every week we're going to do, they would drop a season. And they approach it in a completely different way.
Correct.
breaking the entire previous model. And then all of a sudden people saying, yeah, I binge watched. So when I start hearing, so I look for cultural adoption, culture, when it starts to become part of the cultural landscape and fabric of every day, that's when I go, you're making progress. So, and you could take in a different, take someone like Gary Vaynerchuk. Everyone started saying, yeah, I'm going to crush it. It's like, because he was, that was like his phrase for a number of years. And in fact, a couple of his books, and then even take another Grant Cardone, who with 10x, right? He wrote the 10x rule, and people like 10x. Now everyone's 10x. It's practically become a punchline. So I look for adoption, penetration, reference points, or if people are starting to badmouth you and start going, well, we're not like blah blah blah. All of a sudden
That's right. Yep.
We're on the radar.
Excellent. Great response.
Yeah.
The next question is about startups and small businesses who have limited budgets. I'd love to get your thoughts on how can small businesses with small budgets work towards creating a strong brand?
It comes down, this is an important point for any business to know, particularly the small businesses and startups. There's what I call the 3 pillars of branding. Okay, so sales is like the final pillar, but that's the outcome of 2 previous things. Every sale has had 2 things that preceded it. So what occurs is when we're dealing with this, everyone goes into, we're going to do marketing, we're going to do ads, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. That's one pillar. But here's the problem. Sales is harvesting the seeds planted. That's all that sales is doing. The greatest companies in the world don't have to sell much because people walk in. People don't have to be sold a Tesla. People don't have to be sold an iPhone. The people just line up, they show up, and it's not a matter of will I buy, it's a matter of, well, I'll take that, which color? I'll take that color and I'll take that much memory. Here's my credit card. So sales is harvesting the seeds planted. Okay, if we understand that as a definition of sales, then what happens is we now have marketing as the thing that precedes it, but marketing's job is only to spread those seeds. There's one more thing that precedes that, which is branding. You've got to define those seeds, and how are those seeds different than the seeds that are already available? And that's the part that oftentimes gets missed, because they go, well, we got to do this, we got to get the word out, blah 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 blah. It's not the job of marketing to do that definition. It's their job to execute. So they're spreading those seeds. So we know that those 3 pillars exist: sales preceded by marketing, but marketing preceded by branding. So branding is foundation that will last the lifetime of the organization. So that's the thing that I would say, because I'll give you an example. There's a client that they'd been in business for 25 years. They were successful, but they saw their annual sales dropping. So they were at that point, they were at 3.4 million in sales for their company. I was like, okay. So literally what we did is we put the branding in place. I was brought in to handle that. And without a single cent changed in their marketing over the next 12 months, nothing, no change in their budget, nothing. Sales went up 913,000, almost $1 million, just by handling the thing that was missing, which was the branding.
Amazing.
So so it went from 3.4 to 4.3. Same marketing budget. They just needed to invest into their branding, get it done properly, which we did. And that's just an example. And there's many of those.
Fascinating. Thank you. So I'm now going to talk to you about your book, Brand Intervention. Before we started recording, you're showing me your book.
Yes.
Show me the book and tell me, what was your hypothesis when you started to write your book? There we are. Okay, so I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out David Brier's book, Brand Intervention. I'll go and do the same.
Yes. Basically, at the time that I started writing the book, I had done it. I'd been branding companies of all varieties, all industries, all locations, large, small, startups, small and medium, global brands, etc. And I realized I was always addressing or correcting the same points. The same points. And anytime, and I did this a couple times, and then I was like, oh, stop. Anytime I said, oh, this person's been a CEO for like 25 years, of course they're going to know that. Anytime I discounted it, it would kick me in the behind and it would go, no. And all of a sudden it would come out and I'd go, oh my God, I could have just said it.
Yep.
So I started writing down what are the things. So that was one thing. That was one impetus. The other impetus was, to which we talked about, I was frustrated because the books that I had found, there were some very good books with good theories, but oftentimes out of a 250-page book, there'd be like 10 pages somewhere in the middle that had like everything I wanted to know, and everything before it was a lead up, and everything after it was extrapolation and examples. And that to me was frustrating. I'm like, if I signed up, if I signed up for a treasure hunt, I want to know it so that I can schedule my time accordingly. And so, because I think it's one blind spot of authors is they don't realize the people don't have the judgment to know what's important and what's not. So they're reading, hopefully finding something that they can use.
Fascinating.
So what I did was like I told you, I said I started writing, and I did not. I wanted to have no fluff at all. So I wrote this, and as you see, I mean, I'll show you my favorite. I'll show you my favorite chapter, which is actually chapter 26, because it consists of two sentences. Right. This is good versus great. And it's two sentences, and I don't even put the sentences on the same page. I put them because they're opposite. They complement. These are the two sentences, and I'll read them to you. It says, a good brand makes us feel good about what they stand for. A great brand makes us feel good about what we stand for.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of thing I wanted to really put the practical points to building a real brand in the real world that did not go out of style. It didn't matter whether the technologies, all of a sudden, if we're going to have chips in our wrists, it doesn't matter. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It's the fact that we do have minds, we do have hearts, and we actually, it's our job. We cannot introduce the new by using the language of the old.
Fascinating. David, on that note, we've run out of time, but thank you for teaching me a new definition of branding, which is the art of differentiation. Thank you for talking to me about so many different aspects of branding. I thought I knew a little bit about branding, but I've learned some new things from you about branding today. Thank you also for speaking to me about your book, Brand Intervention. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you so much. You as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.